World-renowned conqueror of continents, Genghis Khan has gone down in history as one of the greatest warlords of all time. Legendary. We've all heard the myths and tales of his famous hordes doing what they wanted, when they wanted, leveraging military might from east to west. Anyone who stood against the Mongol Empire was crushed, with their resources taken. But hey, if you stood with them, you had access to a sprawling, surprisingly progressive network of merchants, militaries, and mighty leaders. It's wild to imagine that all of this happened under a relatively short rule. So wild, in fact, that it begs the following question. What if Genghis Khan was alive today? We like to think that we're beyond the age of warlords, but let's be real. There are plenty of folks out there paying their way through the world with blood. The thing is, none of them have the ability to unify large groups of disparate people under one banner. Thus is the way of a globalized world. Everybody thinks they can do it their own way. Sure, some countries have done their best to impose their values on other smaller nations and leveraged insane military might to keep people in line, but this hasn't happened under one leader with a consistent vision, nor has it established a great deal of safety and unity for those under them. One has to wonder how things might look if Genghis Khan made his way to the forefront of modern international politics. Things have definitely changed since the days of the Mongol Empire. Would he still be able to rule effectively in the modern era? We can look back to Genghis Khan's rise to power and see if it tracks. He was born with a blood clot in his hand, which supposedly means that he was destined for greatness. So if he were alive today, maybe that would stay the same. When he was just a boy, Genghis learned that the way to gain power was through brutal shows of force. He watched his father, leader of his clan, get poisoned by a rival clan at a young age. This pushed his family to the periphery and made it difficult for them to live well. Genghis didn't like this and decided to take action. He killed his half-brother for taking too much food and took over leadership of his clan. This was just the beginning of his forceful ways. Soon he was making a reputation for himself, escaping from the clutches of enemies and banding together different groups. He encountered some setbacks early on, from losing key battles to having to face down his friend turned rival, but eventually he was able to become the sole ruler of the Mongol plains. And what an empire it was too. The second largest in history by landmass next to the British Empire, and the single largest contiguous one ever. Absolutely wild. This would account for most of modern Russia, China, Korea, Southeast Asia, Persia, India, the Middle East, and Eastern Europe. It's a lot of land to say the least, all in one piece too, mostly. Could you imagine if the Mongol Empire still controlled all of this land? So many conflicts could have been avoided, although that doesn't mean there wouldn't be other conflicts under their rule. Things would definitely look different though. Now, I can't say this would be guaranteed, but throughout all of these countries we'd probably see a more unified set of politics and values. See, under Genghis Khan's rule, the Mongol Empire was actually particularly progressive for their time. Although much of their success came from their military might and using horses and new technology, a lot of people accepted their rule thanks to the way that they lived. There was one official way of writing in the Mongol Empire which made it easy for those who lived under it to communicate and trade, leading to further prosperity. Meritocracy was a major value, and folks responded well to this. Gone were the days of being simply born into power or having the right connections catapult you into a favorable position. If you fought well or traded carefully or were an expert information analyst, you could do well for yourself. This impetus to work hard and eke out a place for yourself in Mongol society was key in keeping the strongest and most capable folks in the most important positions. Religious tolerance was also preached across the land, making greater unity between tribes possible. If Genghis Khan was around these days, we'd probably see all these values throughout the countries I mentioned earlier, which could be wild. Not to say that these ideals haven't been adopted by any of these nations, or that they would have immediately come together flawlessly, but to have all that land, all those people unified under one empire would be nuts. The course of history would definitely be altered. Hell, the empire probably could have expanded further had it not been for the death of Genghis Khan. If he'd kept living and leading a while longer, it's very possible that at some point the Mongols could have taken more of Europe. The warfare they favored might not have been as effective there, but it would have definitely been interesting to see how it all played out. Although if he was alive today, he'd have all sorts of new technology to make use of, potentially making it a simpler task to conquer. As a brilliant tactician and politician, Genghis Khan would likely quickly find many ways to keep the conquest going using modern weapons and information gathering technology. Any unsuccessful attacks may well have turned out better had advanced armaments been available to him. Now, having Genghis Khan alive today would cause a lot of uproar, especially amongst those who have strong feelings about his conquest. Looking back on it, we can see the many benefits his conquering brought: widely available trading and communication, a united empire, technological advances, and more. However, that also ignores the massive amount of destruction wrought by the Mongol hordes. This is an empire that took what it wanted and didn't take no for an answer. So while some would applaud and defer to Genghis Khan, others would make their hatred of him very clear. As you might have noticed, folks who commit war crimes, not very well liked. Could you imagine the online discourse surrounding Genghis Khan? Folks rushing to cancel and congratulate him in equal numbers, falling over themselves to decry his actions, and also tell people who disagree with his methods that they're too soft. What a world we live in, right? Another way to look at our question today is to wonder what would happen if Genghis Khan didn't exist back then and instead was born sometime in the modern era. The lack of a single-minded leader like Genghis Khan may have resulted in a very different series of events back in his time. He's largely credited with the unification of many clans, which would go on to take over more land than any one group could ever accomplish. Something tells me that the insane dominance that the Mongol Empire held wouldn't have been the same. So then he'd make his way to the future and be born with a blood clot in his hand at some point in the 20th or 21st century. I don't know if he'd be as successful in today's socio-political climate though. Folks are a lot less willing to let murderous warlords run free. You have to be a lot more coy with your bloodshed. For a while now, the Western mentality of projecting peacefulness and honor while secretly blowing up a bunch of stuff has been the predominant mindset. And with media empires already set up to favorably cover the stories that might not go over so well for those in power, folks with inherited money and power can get away with a lot. We do see a lot of things we'd probably prefer in the way the Mongol Empire ran, but getting that properly up and running these days would be interesting to say the least. So, what do you think? Could the Mongol Empire have survived longer? Would Genghis Khan make it in today's world? Make sure you let me know down in the comments. Speaking of comments, let's take a look at some of your more fresh ones from What If Mother Miranda Was Real? Gianna Cashin says, can you imagine the experiments Umbrella would be doing with COVID out here? Now, don't tell anyone I said this, but what if Umbrella was behind COVID? Bryce Frost says, if she was real, then Lady Dimitrescu is real, and I'm gonna tap that or die trying. You're just gonna die trying. Topic Source says, what if live streamers a thing? What if live streamers were celebrity on the internet? They same recognition as celebrities. Well, we'll get there soon enough, I'm sure. Although it feels like mainstream culture and internet culture are sort of like going down their own paths right now, becoming their own little ecosystems. Green Polo Boy says, never heard of her, I just know churches and nuns are creepy. Hey, you got that right. And David is Awesome says hi. Hey! And that's all the time we have for today. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you next time.